we are with our completed sweater. Everything done but these seams under the arm and this seam along the side of the neck and tacking down that neck edge. Right now I'm going to start at the lower edge and I'm going to sew a seam all the way up, and I'm going to show you how to sew two different kinds of seams. Down in the rib we're going to sew what's called a full stitch weave, and then when we get up into the stockinette section we're going to do a half stitch weave so that you have a little bit of variety. I'm going to lay this down and find excuse me, one of these wonderful pins that I had put in. I'm going to show you my favorite kind of sewing needle too. For doing this particular weight, which is worsted weight, and for actually sewing the seams together, I prefer to use a very blunt needle because it does not puncture the yarn. I thread up my bottom yarn, and my very first, make sure that you have it together right, okay? So this is we're going to go up. At the very end, I come around through that loop. See that bound off loop? And I go back into the center of the stitch that it came out of, and I want you to see what that looks like. Now, can you see that? Look at how nice that is. It looks like a continuous bind off. Then I'm going to take a full stitch weave, which means I'm going to put a whole stitch in the seam allowance. Here are my 1, 2 end stitches. And if you go between those 2 end stitches on this side, you see that there is a bar there. I'm going to pick that up. I'm going to come to the corresponding bar on the other side. Here's 1, 2 stitches. Go between those 2 stitches. Pick up that first bar. I'll tell you why I like this particular seam and the other one I'm going to show you. Once it's established, you always go into the same hole you came out of. Now it might be helpful here if I were using a different color thread, because you could see once I'm started, look at how that nice bent needle just lifts up that bar. Again, I'm going right down the channel between 2 stitches, and the reason is we have a 2x1 rib here, right? And with a 2x1 rib, if we have 2 stitches at each end and we take away one of those stitches, look what it's giving us. A rib of 2 stitches. Let me get that out of the way. Here's 2 stitches, 1 purl. These 2 stitches come together, 1 purl. Clever, yes? Also easy to work on the bond. Go back into the hole you came out of on this side, lift that bar, and I want to run this up very quickly, okay, because I want to tell you about the next stitch that we're going to use. Up when we get into the stockinette section, we are going to do a half stitch weave. First of all, it's my favorite because it is a very small seam binding, or seam allowance, excuse me. I told you I had trouble doing something and talking at the same time. I like that very narrow seam allowance, and it is a wonderful seam. Again, you can't get lost with it because you go into the same hole you go out of. It's just making the transition at the base of the knitting that's a little bit tricky. See how quickly you can move with this seam once you get it established? Okay, now I'm starting to get close to the main body of my knitting. Aha, let's slow up here. This looks like the very last row. And again, this is, you know, right at the waistline, at the side. Nobody's going to be looking too close at these stitches to make sure that you made the transition entirely gracefully. Still, you like to look for it. Now, this is where my body was knitted up, and this first stitch is a little bit twisted. So I'm going to go, now instead of going between the 2 stitches, I'm going to go right into the center. And let's go up one. We'll go up one more because that one is our loop and it's hanging. See what I mean? That you don't have to make the transition exactly there. Do it where it's easier for you. Get this thread out of the way. Here we are. See this end stitch? There's an end stitch. There's an end stitch. There's one. I'm going to go into the center of that end stitch and bring up the very next crossbar. go over onto this side, into the center of the end stitch, there it is. Come up, there's the crossbar. Go into the hole you came out of, which when you have the same color yarns, tricky to find. There it is into the center of that stitch, come up, grab that crossbar. Again, it goes very quickly once you have that end stitch. It is easiest probably to work from the bottom of your knitting toward the top, but it can be worked in either direction. Now I'm going to stop there, and I want to show you a sample of why I love that particular stitch. This tiger sweater was done with that stitch along the sides. And if you look very carefully, this side seam is done in various colors. See how it goes from black to gold to black? And on this side, there's even a better example, because there's one section of black. Well, a lazy knitter does not want to stop and change from gold thread of sewing up a seam to gold, or what do you use, gold or black, and then you get up here and change to black? Oh, no. Watch what happens when I pull this seam. See how I sewed it together with gold thread? And yet it's perfectly invisible. So now I would like you to sew the bottom seams from the bottom rib all the way up to the underarm, so the sleeve seam all the way out to the rib, using those two seams that I showed you, and also working from the bottom of the neck rib to the top. Use a full stitch weave and sew that little seam. And rejoin me and I'll show you how to tack down the neck edge. We're back with our very last step, which is to sew down, to catch down that open rib. And I think I forgot to give you one direction back when we knitted that neck rib, which was when you cut the sweater yarn, you were to leave a good long end. We're going to use this end to catch down the loops. Let me get my glasses here before we get prepared. And again, I have my very blunt needle because I like to catch them down. Remember, the ideal way to do it is to do it loosely. And it's very easy to see which step you ought to be in. See all these live stitches right here? This is a knit, and a purl. Well, a purl on this side is a knit on this side, so that's where we're going to catch it down. So I simply start catching it by coming through there, coming up through that loop. I'm leaving my waste yarn on. The ends sort of get in the way, but I'll pull them out of the way later. Go down one stitch, come up through the next stitch. Even though, leave a nice long end there. There we go. Down through the next stitch, up through that loop. Now see, this is a knit, and you know it's going to be the third one. This is your purl loop. You're right where you're supposed to be. And you do this all the way around, catching it loosely, because remember, we want it to be nice and flexible. And it might look a little sloppy on the inside, and you remove your waste yarn when you're done. But when we are finished, this is the sweater that we have. Our little size 3, flexible neck, fun little sweater that you made almost entirely on the bond. Thanks for joining me for this class, and until I see you again, happy knitting.